Hello, welcome to your academy. At your academy, today in this lecture, we will deal with Virginia Woolf. We will deal with the life of Virginia Woolf, with rather critical life of Virginia Woolf. Rather, I would rather use the word literary life of Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf is one of the leading feminist or female writers from early 20th century and late 19th century. Virginia Woolf was born in 1882 and she died in 1941. Virginia Woolf is one amongst the leading modernist writers from England. The modernist writers, this modernism was a literary movement which continued in England after World War One, in 1920s and 30s, before it was overtaken by postmodernism. And some of the important modernist writers were, for example, James Joyce, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, and Virginia Woolf was the only female writer amongst them. And Virginia Woolf, contributed greatly to the cause of feminism as well as to the cause of female writers in England. From an academic perspective or from literary perspective, Virginia Woolf holds a great place among the feminists of the contemporary times. Virginia Woolf is known to have introduced one of the most important narrative techniques of the modern novel or modern narrative, that is stream of consciousness. She used stream of consciousness technique in most of his novels, and some of the important or one of the most important novel which uses the stream of consciousness narrative is Mrs. Dalloway. Now, this contribution of Virginia Woolf towards literary narrative or towards literature is immense. You will find that in the 20th century, after psychoanalytic criticism or theory became famous, there was a shift in the narrative techniques wherein the novelist or the writer or the author would spend a lot of time in narrating to us what is going on inside the mind of the characters rather than explaining us the external world of their characters. And in doing so, Virginia Woolf leads most of the writers of his age, and she comes equal to in quality to those of like James Joyce or Ezra Pound. As a modernist writer, her contribution is immense, and as I said that this modernism was a literary movement, and it was a movement which focused on making things new. Like Ezra Pound made a famous remark or statement, "Make it new." So they tried to break away from the traditional ways of writing, traditional modes of writing, and tried to incorporate in their writings some new ways and some new forms. And Stream of Consciousness by Virginia Woolf was one of the greatest contribution to the narrative techniques in the modernist age. As a female writer, Virginia Woolf, she was never educated formally like her brothers were. Though she belongs to a very liberal family, her family was atheist in nature. Her mother was also a writer, though not that significant. Her father also wrote, but they were not very renowned writers. But her family was very liberal. Despite having a liberal family, Virginia Woolf never had formal education, though they were informally educated in most of the important languages of that particular times, and that is why this Lady Virginia Woolf had a bent towards writing. So as she grew up, she took a cause for females in her own times, and she addressed many women who belonged to England back then, and talked to them about their rights, talked to them about education, and all the lectures that she delivered were later published into a book which was known as A Room of One's Own. And A Room of One's Own became one of the most famous manifestos or books regarding feminism, or what a female should do, or what rights a female should get. Now, Virginia Woolf is one amongst those writers who is both a critic as well as a novelist. She is known for the novels, for great novels like Orlando, To the Lighthouse, like Mrs. Dalloway. But besides this, she is also known for great or most famous critical essays on feminism like A Room of One's Own and Three Guineas. Virginia Woolf married to a Jew, and after marrying to a Jew, she settled in Bloomsbury, and there she would spend most of her life. In Bloomsbury, Virginia Woolf, along with some other important critical members, formed a group which was known as Bloomsbury Literary Group or Bloomsbury Group. And this Bloomsbury Group is one of an important aspect of Virginia Woolf's career, because in this group there were four important writers from this age. For example, there was E. M. Forster in this, there was Lytton Strachey in it, and there was J M Keynes in this group. Now these men and women, they were, for example, Keynes would be an economist, and others would be members from literature. Though these men, they never formally said that we are a group or we are a Bloomsbury group, but if you read the movements and you read the history of English literature, you will find that this Bloomsbury group is one of the important aspect of the lives of Lytton Strachey, of Virginia Woolf, of E. M. Forster, and of J M Keynes. This group of literary men, it settled around Bloomsbury, and they would meet and study and discuss about literary things, and they created great pieces of literature, as Virginia Woolf did, E. M. Forster did, Keynes became a famous economist, and even Lytton Strachey became an important writer, an important figure. So that was about Bloomsbury group, and Virginia Woolf was associated with Bloomsbury group. Some of the important works that Virginia Woolf had written are To the Lighthouse, Orlando, and Mrs. Dalloway. Amongst these, Mrs. Dalloway is the most famous work written by Virginia Woolf, but besides that, To the Lighthouse and Orlando are of no less significance. Orlando has got one of the most non-linear narratives that you will find in English literature, a novel which begins in Elizabethan age, ends in Victorian age. It spans for over 400-500 years, and then again the protagonist of this particular novel would only be 32 years old or so. So that was highly non-linear way of writing or approaching to the plot. So Orlando is very important in that context. Another important aspect of Virginia Woolf's life and writing has been, although she was a prominent feminist of this age, but she would also talk about lesbian in her writings. And Orlando is one of an important examples of it, wherein you will find that Orlando, who is actually a male initially, turns out to be female in later part of the story. So many critics in the contemporary times, or during second wave feminism or third wave feminism, would look into Virginia Woolf from lesbian perspectives. And she also becomes an important member in the queer theory then. The works of Virginia Woolf were highly influential, or read and spread during second wave feminism. The second wave feminism came in 1960s. It was one of the most radical movements of feminism, and during this phase the works of Virginia Woolf would become very famous, particularly her works like A Room of One's Own and Three Guineas became important. Virginia Woolf led the movement in England for women's right to writing. She believed that in Western society there is no lack of intellectuality among the females. Females are intellectuals, they can write, they can read, but the problem with females in the West is that they are not given enough space or right to write. So she, in A Room of One's Own, would suggest that a woman needs only a room of her own and few guineas or few pennies in her pocket to write. And if a female is given these rights, they can excel in writing in literary field also, like those of men. Now that was about Virginia Woolf and about her literary career. I didn't touch her personal life. If you want to know about her personal life, As I said, she was born in a very influential, well-read family. Her family was an atheist, so she also had got no liking towards religion. She married to a Jew, and her life was not very smooth. She had many mental breakdowns during her lifetime, and eventually she also, tried to commit suicide 2 3 times, and she was saved, and eventually she died also by drowning herself in the water. So you will find that her personal life was not that smooth or that great as the literary life looks. So I do not want to go in detail of her personal life. Rather, if you know about her her literary life and her achievements in literary life, that would be more important. Another important aspect of her life is controversies. Any great woman or man who becomes famous through any art or perspective of his, whether it be literature, through his writings or other things, they are controversial. And Virginia Woolf was no exception to this rule. She had her own fair share of controversies, though most of her controversies do not spring up through her writing, but they come to the fore through letters or through private letters of hers. And when we go through her private letters, we find that she had a very negative attitude towards the lower class. For example, she said that these lower class people should die, these imbeciles should be killed, and she also had never any good things to say about Jews. Though she married Jews, but she would call them, they are greasy kind of people, they are cowards, and she would never like Jews. So not liking Jews was not very uncommon during those days. Or hating the people of lower class was also not that queer thing to be to have in English society. There were only few who would support the people from the lower class society, because it was post-industrial England, and industrial setup had just taken over England, and England was becoming a very hub of industrialization, and this class system was at its peak during those times. So you will find Virginia Woolf in her private letters reflecting her ideas, which were not intersectional or which were not objective in nature, but rather were very subjective. Eventually, Virginia Woolf died in 1941 by drowning herself. And her legacy as a feminist critic continues even today. She is one of the most influential female writers from the past, including like those of George Eliot and Emily Bronte and Catherine Mansfield and others. And if you read a work by Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex, she talks about those female writers who have lived ever, and she includes in that list Virginia Woolf at the very beginning, and she also includes Emily Bronte besides Catherine Mansfield. Now that was about Virginia Woolf. In today's lecture, we dealt with Virginia Woolf, her literary life, and also I gave a reference to her personal life in between and her legacy. That is all we have at the World of Literature. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to share, like, comment, and subscribe at your academy for more interesting stuff.